Let me talk to him. Come on.
Good morning. My name is Angela Bell, and I am a Gold Star mother. A Gold Star mother is a mother who lost their child while their child was on active duty. My son was Sergeant Sean Bell of the United States Army. Sean was born January 16th, 1983, and he died February 28th, 2021. From the sixth grade, Sean had always wanted to be in the military. My only stipulation for that was that he talked to all the branches of the service. And when the Army recruiter came, they were just like, rah, 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 rah. And so he chose the Army. He never talked about college. He really wasn't college bound. However, excuse me, while he was in the Army, he obtained 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees, and was in the middle of his doctoral degree when he died. He was a Bronze Star recipient, which is a Legion of Merit recipient, and many other countless awards. He served in Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, Korea. He was at Camp Roberts in Paso Robles, California. He was stationed at Fort Gordon in Augusta, Georgia. He was stationed at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And then his last duty station was Fort Belvoir in Virginia, between Fort Belvoir and the Pentagon. Sean started his career as a comms guy, communication guy. He was the one that went out when he was downrange and set up all the communication tents and all the everything for the officers to come in and do the comms work. He switched his MOS probably 6-8 years in, maybe, to cyber. He did cyber work. He was one of the founding members of a new program through the Army called UNISA, United States Army Strategy Support Element. So it was a brand new initiative that they were getting off the ground. And so he was handpicked to start that billet or endeavor, or what, I don't know what you want to call it. The one thing I can tell you about Sean is from the time he was a little teeny tiny boy, he was an avid Cowboy fan, like a huge Cowboy fan. My husband and my father, of course, are both Commander fans. And so there was a lot of angst in the house, especially at Thanksgiving when, the Cowboys played the Redskins. Sean would sit in the chair with his hand over his head like this and his hand on his stomach, and he would watch the game and he wouldn't say anything, whether the Cowboys were winning, which normally that's what happened, but whether they were winning or losing, until the end. And then once it was over, he was just like, So he was always a Cowboy fan. He didn't really follow any other sports other than the Cowboys. He was a great kid. I don't remember him ever getting in any trouble other than like when he was 17, he got in a little bit of trouble at home. But other than that, he was a respectful kid. He loved his mom and dad. Like, I have absolutely no doubts about that. While he was stationed at Fort Belvoir, he was usually my morning conversation. Because, traffic up there is really bad, and, it would take me about 30 minutes to drive back and forth to work. So I usually talk to him probably 4 mornings a week, and then, once or twice on the weekends. I was his go-to person to chat with. His dad was the person that he called if he needed something. I did his eulogy, and the one thing that I can honest and truly say is that I have no regrets. And when I say that, I think some people, the perception that some people have is just like, how can you say that? But the last conversation that I had with him, I answered the phone and I was like, hello, son. And he was like, hello, mother, because that's what he would say to me, right? In the mornings when he answered the phone. And he always called me Madre. He never really called me mom. He always called me Madre. And both of my kids did actually. And we had our conversation, whatever our conversation was. And at the end of the conversation, he said, I love you, mom. And I said, I love you too, son. And that was the day before he died. That was the day before he died. Actually, it was probably the day he died because I think he died later that night. But I don't, I've talked to different people and they're like, um, well, I would go back and do this, and I would go back and do that, and I would go back and do this. And I don't, he was raised to the best of our ability. His father and I are still married. We've been married almost 43 years, which you don't find very often. Um, and he has a younger sister. She'll be 38 in September. Um, they, they were normal siblings growing up. And then when he left to join the army, they became closer because, he wasn't there. Um, he just was a good kid. Um, I'm not, back to what I was saying, like, so I have no regrets because I don't know what I would have done differently. I don't, sometimes people pinpoint this, that, and I don't know what I would have done differently, if anything. Um, I know 100% that that kid knew I loved him, and I know that he loved me. Like, no absolute doubt in my mind whatsoever. And so I being on this journey, it's a pretty recent journey for me. I'm about 4.5 years. I take the tragedy of Sean dying, and of course, his dad and I always say, the next time we see him, and I'm going to see him again, I'm going to punch him dead in his face, and then I'm going to give him the biggest hug that there is, right? Um, and so I take this tragedy and try to channel it. This is the face of suicide. This is what's left. Um, it is a permanent solution to a temporary issue. And if you Google or research people that, have attempted suicide and survived, they didn't want to die. They just wanted to stop whatever they had going on at that time. And so I am always willing to speak because if I can help one other person, then I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, right? I'm turning my tragedy into something positive to hopefully help someone else, whether I know about it or not. I talk about Sean all the time because as long as I talk about him, he'll never be forgotten. Um, I tell people he was named after Sean Connery. That's who he was named after. Um, and I remember, when Sean Connery passed away, I had posted something on Facebook about, Sean Connery passed away, and one of Sean's friends said, did you know you were named after Sean Connery? And Sean was like, yeah, I've been hearing it my whole life that I was named after Sean Connery. Um, and so, I'm not really, if you gave me $1 million to pinpoint what happened, I couldn't pinpoint anything. I do know that the night he died, he was drinking. I know he was arguing with his wife. I know he had a lot of stress on him, from, getting ready to retire, doing all the things that he had to do to get ready for retirement, trying to decide if he wanted to come home to Chesapeake or if he wanted to, stay in the DC area, which he did not like it up there, but he had to make the decision. Did he want to go government contractor? Did he want to go in the GS world? Did he want, what did he want to do? Plus with UNISA, it was, like right in the middle of that process or toward the end of that process. And he didn't want to retire without finishing what he started. That's how he was. And so if I could pinpoint one thing, I don't think I could. I do know that he had PTSD. I do know that, like a lot of people who come from, downrange, when they come home, when firecrackers would go off or cars would backfire, he would, cringe, and if he wasn't prepared for it. I do know that he had a hard time driving in traffic. Like, he didn't like the feeling of being boxed in. Because when he was awarded his Bronze Star, at the time he was awarded the Bronze Star, he was driving a 2-star in active combat because they needed someone to drive and no one volunteered. And Sean was like, I'll do it. And so, he was very stoic in, doing his job and doing the right thing. And he was, he received a Bronze Star because of that. And so, I think that affected him. And I know there were times that I would say to him, Sean, you need to go talk to somebody. And he would say, Mom, I can't. He said, I could lose my job. I'd lose my clearance. I can't. And every time I think about that, I think about when you go on a base, right? And one of the buildings that you see says behavioral health, right? So have you ever gone to the principal's office or your parents' bedroom or your boss's office for a sit down because you were having good behavior? No, you were going because you were having a behavioral issue, right? So when you have these buildings on base and you and I are together in the military, and I see you going in there, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't want to, work with her because, she's nutso because she's going into that building and she's seeing somebody. There's a stigma with it. There's a stigma. And I think it's more so in the military because you're taught in boot camp that I'm tough. Nothing can touch me, and I am, nothing is supposed to touch me. But from my side of the fence, I think I would rather be in a foxhole with you, knowing that even though you have an issue, you sought help for that issue, right? Because that gives me a little more comfort than to know I'm in a foxhole with you and you could go off your nut any minute and I would know it, right? Because you didn't seek the help that you may or may not need. And it could be a one-time request for help, or it could be a multiple request for help. And I do understand the concept of our military. I understand they're there to defend and protect. I understand that, but they're also human beings. And from your little E1s to your, 5 stars, they all put their pants on the same way, one leg at a time. They are human beings. And your 5-star might have the same mental issues or aversion to broccoli as your little E1 does. That doesn't make them bad people because they have an aversion to broccoli, right? You fix broccoli however they want it, and then they become accustomed to eating it. I know that's a dumb analogy, but I do dumb analogies like that. And one of the things that I also advocate for is, thinking back on some of the conversations I had with Sean, that, he was always afraid that he would lose his clearance, right? So when you talk to the when you talk to the officers or the, your E8s and E9s, oh no, that would never, blah, 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 blah. But it never gets down to the E1s and the E2s. So if you really believe that you need to get information down to your enlisted group of people, then what you do is the next time you have a meeting, all of your, officers, next time you have a meeting and discuss the suicide rate in the military, which they have those meetings, they have those meetings, you invite your enlisted, not your high ranking enlisted, your E1, your E2, your E3, and you invite them to the room. You don't invite them to speak. You don't invite them to present. You don't invite them to ask questions. You invite them to listen. Because when you hear something verbatim from the horse's mouth, you're more likely to repeat it than if you play the telephone game, right? Because when you play the telephone game, you never get the right answer at the end of the telephone game, right? And so it's like that, if you have a great dining experience somewhere, or, you go to the barista at Starbucks and that person, every time you go in there, they got your coffee ready, they got your muffin ready, everything is ready, ready, ready. You're going to tell however many people that you know what? Susie Q at the Starbucks is the best customer service person I have ever seen in my life, right? So now Susie's off and Sally is at the Starbucks and Sally is not good at her job, right? And so now you're like, okay, Susie's gone and Sally's here. I'm never going back to that Starbucks, right? And so you tell people that. And so if you want to get rid of the perception that it will affect your clearance, it needs to come from the top to the bottom, not the bottom to the top, right? And the best way to do that is you don't put these people on blast and say, okay, you have to answer 30 questions, or you have to do a presentation, or just sit them over there, give them a muffin and a cup of coffee in the room with the officers and let them listen to the conversation. Let them listen to the conversation. Then one-on-one, then the officer goes to the enlisted kid and says, tell me what you thought about that, right? Like, how many people did you tell? What did you talk? You know what I mean? Because that's the only way to infiltrate the people that are concerned about it. And so one good thing about that we've done is we've changed the suicide hotline number, right? So it's not 1-800 blah, 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 blah. It's now 988. A simple number like 911, 988. And to me, that's a huge impact. I mean, I think we still have a epidemic, but I think that's way easier to call than try to look up a 1-800 suicide hotline number, right? And so, I do everything that I can do. I am the current president of the American Gold Star Mothers Hampton Roads chapter, and I'm also the department president, which is in the state of Virginia. I am also on the Mayor's Commission for Veterans Affairs for the city of Chesapeake. And I'm the first civilian to ever hold a commission on that, hold a spot on that commission as a civilian. Because when I applied as a Gold Star mother, and they figured I brought a different perspective. They still have a lot to learn. And when we reconvene next month, I'm going to have a conversation about it, because we just had our Memorial Day celebration. We had 5 Gold Star mothers in the audience, and we were not recognized. Then I went to the city of Norfolk, and the city of Norfolk recognizes us and our children in their Memorial Day ceremony. So, by educating people about my sacrifice, then I think eventually it will help. Eventually, I don't know. So that's pretty much my story. You know, that's how I advocate, and those are the things that I do. Is it gonna bring Sean back? No, it's not. Could I change it? Yes, I would, but I can't. And so I have to live with Sean's actions, but maybe like I said at the beginning, my tragedy will help someone else. That's my hope. That's my hope.